This event ruined my little town, and I'd prefer to not have a name to it. I am not a cop, I am a firefighter, but my partner at the time was an officer, and due to this event, he took his life. I am telling this in the hopes it helps others learn from this mistake. It was New Year's Eve. I was on the 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. shift. My partner, I'll call him Jay, was also working the midnight shift at the station. The fire and police buildings are right next to each other, and being New Year's Eve, each of the stations were having a small get-together. The cops came over to one of our empty bays, and we were sitting down eating and talking about how much it sucked being on this shift. No alcohol to see the New Year's in. We always had a high amount of calls due to fireworks being illegally set off, and they always had a high number of violence and public nuisance calls. Our alarm went off. We jumped up and threw our jackets on before even checking our pager or the EIC's, Emergency Information Computer Service. The boys next door got the same call, and we went out code 1 with the police escorting. We arrived on scene just before midnight. I think it was like 1:45. A young woman was standing on the edge of the building. It isn't a massive height, but it doesn't matter. She wouldn't survive if she fell. We all knew it. Crew leader shouted to get the ground covered, and the cops started talking to her. Jay had been handed the job. He told me it was because he was the youngest, that he would be able to relate more to her. She started crying and saying she didn't want to do it. It was a mistake. She just felt so alone that she just wanted it to stop. Then she said that it was too late. She had to do it because she had already done everything she needed to. Jay started to tell her that it didn't matter if everything was in its place. She didn't need to do it, and they would help her. He started telling her that 2 people would be going into the building and would meet her at the window to help her down, that she wasn't alone, and everybody here was going to support her. No one was here to hurt her. All those really cliché things you hear in movies. But Jay had a way with people. He could tell you the sky was made just for you, and you would believe every word. Every word coming out of his mouth was filled with nothing but love and concern. I loved that man, and even now he's gone, I still miss him. Things were going fine. We had been given the access code to the building. The cops had rung ambos and requested ECAT. The young girl had calmed down and was trying to climb back into the window. She tripped and fell backwards. Nobody had expected it. She hit the ground, and even with the ambos working on her for a solid 15 minutes, she was pronounced dead. Coroner was called. Here's the bit that messed Jay up so badly that he ultimately took his life. When she had told them that she had taken care of everything, she had meant her 2 children, 3 months and 4 years. They were found dead in their beds, cuddled up to their toys. Photos taken showed them looking like they were simply sleeping. The note they found on the table was begging forgiveness from God for what she had done. The coroner stated that if they had been found within 15 minutes of us arriving, the 4-year-old may have had a small chance of surviving, although serious brain damage would have probably occurred. Jay always blamed himself for not sending a party in the minute they got there. We were evaluated as to why the fire department didn't have a fall mat. The first responders were suspended, and Jay couldn't live with himself. I lost Jay in the autumn of the new year. He would have been 26 in August. This may not be the saddest story here, but it's a story that has ruined a number of families' lives. Over the years, I've seen quite a few things that hurt my heart, and a few stick with me 20+ years later. The one I remember the most vividly, especially this time of year, it was December 22nd, which also happens to be my wedding anniversary. We were in the latter weeks of our academy training, and the last half of December they put us with a training officer for some of our field experience. Around 7 p.m., we receive a call of a person shot at an apartment complex and arrive at the scene within 5 minutes. My FTO and I are the first to arrive, and inside, we find a 9-year-old boy huddled in the kitchen sobbing. On the floor near him is his father, shot through the chest, with a revolver on the floor nearby. In one bedroom, we find his mother, also shot in the chest, but still alive and conscious, calling for her son. Paramedics arrive and work feverishly on the mother. She remains conscious and calls for her son repeatedly until they wheel her out. Her son is terrified and will not go to her. As the rookie, my job is to stay with the son. Over the next hour or so, until child services arrives. I try to comfort him as best I can and encourage him to see his mom before they take her out, knowing that she is unlikely to make it. But he cries, huddles on the floor in the corner, and refuses to move. The detectives and CSI arrive and the facts unfold. Parents are divorced. Father lives out of state and had come to see his son for Christmas. An argument between the parents ensued with the son present in the bedroom. The husband shoots the wife once in the chest and the son runs into the kitchen and huddles in the corner. Father walks up to son, points the gun, pulls the trigger, and nothing happens. Father then points gun at himself, pulls the trigger, and fires. He is dead upon our arrival. Examination of the revolver shows spent round. Mother: misfire. Son: spent round. If that doesn't make one think of a higher power. Towards the end of our shift, we go by the fire station that responded to the scene. The firemen and paramedics seated in their break area, decorated for Christmas, but sitting mostly in the dark, all visibly upset. When they see us, the station chief simply shakes his head and walks away. One of the paramedics looks up and tells us that they kept her alive until they reached the hospital, but the bullet nicked her aorta and she died shortly thereafter. We left the station, turned in our paperwork, and went home. That was the first homicide scene in my career and something that I think of every year at my anniversary, and hope that young boy has had a better life since that day. We were called to a domestic dispute, and we knew that the apartment was the dwelling of a known drug user. We arrived and the door was open, having been kicked in before we arrived. With yelling and smashing going on inside, we took that as invitation to enter, and did so, announcing our presence. Inside the apartment was a complete pigsty with needles lying on the floor, pizza boxes and food containers scattered everywhere. I couldn't believe anyone could live in that mess. The male was still arguing with a female who was obviously a drug user too. I looked at the blackened wallpaper and saw it move. Closer up, it had been smeared with excrement, which had attracted swarms of insects, flies, etc., and that was what I'd mistaken for a wall covering. Then I looked up the stairs and saw 2 young children, filthy, neglected, dressed only in adult t-shirts, trying to hide from the shouting and screaming below. I knew I would have to involve social services, and my heart broke when they started to cry for mommy, who was so far out of it that she'd forgotten she'd even had children. The children had obviously not had been wearing diapers, and they had feces dripping down their legs. What disgusted me the most, though, was my own attitude at that moment. Those kids needed comforting, and I hesitated because of the smell and their mess. I went up, took them both in my arms, and walked them to a neighbor next door, where between us we cleaned them up and called for social services to come. My fellow officer, meanwhile, arrested both adults for child neglect. So my most depressing thing I saw wasn't the mom and her partner. It wasn't even the 2 children who'd been living in that hellhole. It was me. My attitude when I was willing, even temporarily, to allow my own personal prejudice to come between showing the care and affection those 2 little kids desperately needed at that moment.